Hey, what's up, guys? Arrows the Dragon here, Zen Dragon Healing. Let me tell you, a lot of our problems in interpersonal relationships could be solved or avoided entirely with clear communication. All right? The problem with communication today is the illusion that has taken place. We think that because we've shared our thoughts, ideas, emotions, feelings, and whatnot, that we have communicated. We assume that because someone's making eye contact with us, that they're responsive to us during communication, that they have actually heard us or even understood us, right? Another big problem is during communication, more often than not, it seems that we listen to respond rather than listening to understand. That is probably the biggest problem with communication. We're all guilty of it, especially in close interpersonal relationships, especially when an emotional issue arises. Anything that gets us emotionally heated, we have a really hard time listening when the other person's speaking, and the process of communication, or rather the lack thereof, where we're listening and waiting for our turn to respond, okay? Not only are we not hearing and understanding what the other person is saying, right? But we're also allowing our emotions to interfere with our ability to communicate clearly in such a way that the person that we're talking to is able to understand what it is that we're trying to communicate, okay? Now, there's a solution to this problem, all right? And the solution, I think, first and foremost, would be to practice listening, all right? Listening as a practice, meditative speaking, I've been doing for well over 2 decades, and it's helped me to understand myself and to understand others a lot better, okay? By simply taking a few minutes here and there to stop whatever I'm doing and to just listen to what's going on around me. Now, listening, like actually listening, requires that we cease judgment. That is, that when we're hearing, we're not necessarily listening. What we're doing is we're formulating this narrative inside of our heads to describe what it is that we're hearing. And in fact, oftentimes, not hearing it at all. What we're hearing is our thoughts, okay? I'm gonna say that again. What we're hearing is what we think and how we feel about the data that is coming into our brains through our ears, all right? So taking time to practice listening to the things going on around us and becoming aware of the judgments and the stories that we tell ourselves about what it is that we're hearing will actually make us a more effective listener, okay? And now, when it comes to direct communication with people, we do this while we're reading also. Someone sends a long text, okay, we have a tendency to skim through that and look for the main points that we're going to respond to, and then respond on that basis without understanding what is even being communicated to us. All right, we're all guilty of this, guys. You know what I'm talking about, okay? So what I started doing years ago is when someone's talking to me, in my mind, I will repeat every word they are saying verbatim, word for word, back to myself. That almost guarantees that I'm actually receiving the data that they are sending. Now, another important part of listening is asking questions. I'll get back to that. A really important part of communication is letting the person that's talking to us know that we are actually listening to them, inserting a response every now and then. Yeah, gotcha. Okay, right? Not too often. Like every couple of minutes or so, like every 3 minutes. Now, studies have shown that we have the ability to listen intently to someone for about 3 minutes before our focus starts to wander. So developing this practice of every 3 minutes in a conversation of listening to someone and just acknowledging that we're listening to them snaps us back into the present, into the reality, into the here and now, so that we can continue hearing and listening and trying to understand this person. Now, another big part about listening is if someone says something that we don't fully understand, okay, taking a moment to stop them and ask them to better explain that eliminates the lack of understanding from the whole entire system of communication. At least mostly eliminates it. We can only understand so far as our knowledge and our wisdom will allow us to understand. But you know what? Given the opportunity, people will usually explain what it is they're trying to say pretty clearly and pretty simply. Now, part of communicating as we're speaking to someone is we assume that because we're speaking that they're listening, and because they're listening that they're understanding what we're saying. But you know what? If you really pay attention to someone when you're talking to them, Their body language and facial expressions is going to let you know whether or not they're actually listening to you and they actually understand you. Okay, this is important. Only 10% of human communication is actually verbal. 80% is physical. And then 10% is energetic. But that's a topic of discussion for another time. Like tuning into a person's vibration is something that may come naturally to some of us, but it's a skill that actually has to be developed in order for us to use it effectively. And the really cool thing about that is when we develop that skill, oftentimes we can understand perfectly well what someone's saying when they're not saying a single word. We'll make a video on that coming up in the near future for you guys. So communicating, speaking clearly, okay? Paying attention to the person that we're talking to, okay? Making sure that they are actually paying attention, keeping their attention by not boring them with repetitive nuances and whatnot. Actually keeping their attention, communicating clearly. And here's the thing, communicating in a simple fashion. See, a lot of us think we've developed this idea that with an expanded vocabulary that we are better communicators, but in fact, we're not. The overuse of extensive, expansive words that are difficult for the average person to understand actually causes a breakdown in communication, which is why some old spiritual texts are written in such a simple form that even a small child can understand them, but adults have a tendency to let it fly right over our heads, all right? Communication does not have to be complex in order for it to be clear and concise. In fact, simpler is better when it comes to communication, especially when we're communicating with someone close to us about something, about a situation or circumstance that is emotionally charged. This is the time when we really need to practice clear, concise communication, which requires 3 things: talking, listening, understanding. Understanding is the important part. And we can't just assume that someone understands us because we think that they're listening to us. And what's even worse is when someone's talking to us and we don't understand them and we don't ask them to explain deeper, to expound on what it is that they're saying. What happens is we start to make all sorts of assumptions. And in situations that are emotionally charged, those assumptions can be wildly inaccurate. And what happens is something that was a simple problem that had a simple solution becomes now an overblown, extensive, massive, unnecessarily problematic situation, right? That can be avoided by listening and not making assumptions, by understanding, by asking questions, by acknowledging the person that we're talking to and acknowledging the person that's talking to us, by being aware of our nonverbal communication, body language, vibe, what we're putting off energetically. Okay, another thing that I found is really important. Before even having a conversation of an emotionally charged nature, it is important that we center ourselves. It is of extreme importance that we don't go into a conversation with someone that we care about angry. Because that vibe is easy to pick up on even if you're not tuned into it. All right, we know when we're angry, right? And yelling. Okay, talking more loudly or faster does not make someone understand us. In fact, what happens is we put this block up when someone starts yelling or someone comes at us in a manner that feels like it's aggressive or attacking. So it's important to pay attention to our own body language. What are we putting off when we're communicating with someone? Relax, take it easy. Because see, here's the thing, 3 minutes of miscommunication can cause an entire lifetime of heartache. You can destroy in a matter of moments a relationship that has taken years to build by not practicing effective communication, by not being aware, by not listening, by not understanding, and by not speaking clearly. This is of paramount importance, people. So please, get on your shit. Start communicating clearly. Let's start solving problems instead of making them worse. Follow me for more. Subscribe to my channel, like this video, share this video. I love y'all.